Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for today's informational webinar. This webinar is brought to you by the California chapter of the American Planning Association. My name is Stephanie Rojas, and I'm the Vice President of Professional Development for APA California. And I'm so glad that you decided to spend your lunch hour today to learn more about the AICP certification process. Now, some of you may have been thinking about pursuing certification for a while, and now with changes in your work environment, maybe you finally found the time to consider it seriously. Or some of you may be new to the profession and want to pursue certification to help give you a competitive edge on the job market. Whatever your situation may be, we're happy that you're taking this important first step, which is learning more about what it means to be AICP. Now, before we jump into the presentation, I do want to thank and recognize a few folks. Thank you so much to Dudek, who has been a longtime partner of APA. They lent us their graphics team to help us prepare the presentation today. And I also want to thank all of the local APA sections for helping us spread the word. Perhaps you learned about this webinar through your local section. So thank you so much to them. Next slide, please. So we'll start the presentation by first talking about the benefits of AICP, but really we'll be focusing the bulk of this presentation on the 4 steps to becoming a certified planner. And one thing that we really want to emphasize is that AICP is not just about passing an exam. It's so much more than an exam, so we'll be covering each step in the certification process in detail. We'll be concluding with resources provided by APA, followed by a Q&A. So a couple of housekeeping reminders now that I'm hoping everybody is settled into the presentation. Yes, this webinar is being recorded, so don't feel the need to take notes of everything or take pictures of this of the screen. This is being recorded and you will have access to it. We'll be emailing a link of the recording to everybody that registered. And this presentation is jam-packed with lots of details and good information. So in that email, we'll also be sending you a link to that PowerPoint presentation. So it'll continue to be a resource for you long after. And if you have any questions, please type them into the question and answer box in Zoom. If there is a question that was already asked, feel free to upvote those questions, and we will be answering all of the questions at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, so I have the pleasure of being joined by 2 excellent speakers today. First, we have Asha Bleier, who is the Director of Dudek's Planning and Urban Design Group. She has worked on a full range of planning efforts such as regional and general plans, community plans, TOD, resilience planning, and design guidelines. She serves on the APA California board as the AICP exam coordinator. Asha also sits on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion subcommittee for her local San Diego section. Our second speaker is Francisco Contreras, who is the Innovation Manager for the City of West Hollywood. There he leads the Smart City program and is responsible for organizational leadership on innovation and technology issues. In 2019, Francisco was elected to serve as the AICP Commissioner, representing our region on the APA national level. He has served on the APA National Membership Standards Committee since 2015. And last, before I turn it over to Asha, if anybody does have any questions after the presentation or just anytime in the future regarding AICP and pursuing certification, please email us at profdev@apacalifornia.org. I'm going to type that into the chat box so that everybody can have it for reference in the future. So with that, I will turn it over to Asha. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I really appreciate the introductions and being a part of today. Also wanted to just mention that previous to my position on the state chapter, I did serve on the local San Diego section board for about 10 years. And during almost all of that time, I served as professional development officer in charge of our local AICP exam prep sessions. So I'm pleased to say those are an available resource online, and we'll talk about resources later in the presentation. But I really am committed to helping folks learn more about AICP and get the tools that they need to become certified planners. So with that, we're going to go ahead and do a quick poll. We want to really gauge where you all are in the process. And I will go ahead and open the poll up for voting now. But if one of these categories doesn't quite suit you, definitely feel free to add a comment in the in the Q&A for us as well, if you'd want to share any other comments. So we'll leave this for just a couple minutes here. Okay, and we've got about 156 here, which is great turnout. All right, so we went ahead and closed the poll. Let's share those results. Perfect. Okay, so of the 156 or so, a little over half are planning to take the exam in May. So excellent, great to have you guys with us. We've got a few that are about 12% that are looking to take the exam in November of this year. And then a little under half, 48%, that are not yet registered for the exam. So we're going to be covering a lot of great information here that will be applicable to everyone, all of you. So, okay, let's get to the next slide here. All right. So the first thing we wanted to really cover today is a little bit about what AICP really means. You're all here for a reason, and we certainly commend you all for taking the first steps to certification. AICP, or the American Institute of Certified Planners, is really shorthand for education, experience, breadth of knowledge, ethical practice, and the commitment to the planning profession. The majority of planning employers say that AICP certification is a factor when hiring planners. Employers hiring a certified planner know that it demonstrates your commitment to the highest standard of excellence and ethical practice. Certified planners have verified their academic and professional achievements, submitted essays successfully demonstrating that their experience meets criteria for professional planning practice, and passed that rigorous comprehensive exam demonstrating their capabilities. AICP planners are leaders in the field. Also wanted to note that the credential does, of course, follow you throughout your career, not your employer, and as long as you continue with your maintenance requirements, which we will cover later in the presentation. So once you earn your AICP, you are held to a code of ethics, which is rightfully a part of the exam itself as well. You really should get to know the code of ethics, memorize it, really understand it. This credential also pushes you to get involved in more professional activities because you'll need to maintain your ongoing certification maintenance. Wanted to add that 93% of AICP members say that the AICP certification meets or exceeds their expectations for helping them remain professionally current. And a majority of planning employers agree that AICP certified planners are up to date with changes and advances in our field. And with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to Francisco to talk a little bit about the different paths to AICP that are now offered. Thank you.
Thank you, Asha, and thanks everyone for joining us during your lunch break, and thank you, Stephanie, for the invitation to participate. So I'm really excited to see that so many of you are interested in taking the path to certification, and I'm so happy that we're able to provide you with some hopefully information to get you to the end of the journey. So just as a brief overview, there are two paths to AICP certification. So the traditional path, which many of you are familiar with, and then the new AICP candidate program that provides students and recent graduates with a path to start the AICP process earlier in their careers. So the criteria to become AICP are the same. They are just sequenced slightly differently. So we are going to review sort of the new and improved traditional path to certification more in depth in this presentation as we go along. But I did want to provide just a little overview of the AICP candidate program as well. So with the AICP candidate pilot program, eligible members are able to take the exam fresh out of school and prior to earning their professional planning experience. After passing the exam, they are eligible to use the AICP candidate designation on their resumes and in their social media and LinkedIn, anything to help them on their career trajectory. After earning the required number of years of professional planning experience, the candidates can submit essays, and then upon approval, and once they pay dues, they actually become AICP members. So candidates do have 5 years from the time they enroll in the program to complete the full path to AICP certification. Next slide. So at the bottom of the AICP candidate webpage, there is a very useful guide that was just recently updated. So we do advise folks to check the website and check the guide for any new information that might be available. But the guide really goes through each of those individual steps really in depth. So always check the website often, and that goes for both the traditional path and then the traditional pilot program. Next slide. So your AICP certification journey does include those 4 steps that both Stephanie and Asha have mentioned. There's an application component. There are a planning experience essays that are very important, and I'll go to those in a second. And then the certification exam itself. And then once you are AICP, your certification maintenance. Changes were made to the AICP certification process to make becoming AICP certified more flexible than ever. So those were just implemented last year and are in effect now. So these changes remove some of the barriers that APA had heard from prospective and current AICP members, and they really make the process easier to understand and explain. So I'm just going to give you some of the highlights of some of those changes. So the new AICP certification process really elevates the essays to the level of importance and value that they carry in certification. So before, the essay submissions and reviews were sort of bundled as part of your education and employment verification. And so, many candidates would be disqualified from taking the exam simply because their essay submissions were denied along with their job certification, et cetera. So now essays are submitted separate from that education and employment verification portion of the application. So although the first step sort of remains the same, you have to complete your education and your employment, and that gets verified. Prospective AICP members can choose whether they want to take the exam first or do their essays first. So that allows flexibility for you to continue your journey even if you fail one of those particular components. So if you were denied, if your essays were denied, you can still go ahead and take the exam, and vice versa. If you took the exam and hopefully you didn't fail that, but if you did, you could take your, you can still submit your essays and not have to wait a really long time in between those steps. So all of the requirements for AICP certification remain the same, and they must be met before your certification is awarded. So hopefully with these changes, it does make it a little bit more flexible and allows for more of you to become certified in the long run. Thank you. And so Asha will go on to describe some of the actual application components.
Great, thank you, Francisco. It's really nice to hear that, APA National is kind of responding. We've heard a lot of feedback, I know, at the local and state level about the essays, and, I know that can present a challenge for some folks. So it's nice that it's kind of broken out and you can do it, in a number of different ways. So a little bit, so we're going to start with step 1 now. So the application itself. We have here, this is a snapshot from the APA National website, and I have the link below as well. So I'm just going to take a quick pause so that you all can kind of process. I know just the eligibility requirements alone are often sometimes confusing for people, and I get a lot of questions about that. So I'll just let you all kind of digest the requirements a little bit, and feel free to add into the Q&A if you have any questions about this. And so while you're kind of reviewing, I wanted to let you know that PAB stands for the Planning Accreditation Board. And you can see if your school is PAB accredited at the link provided on the slide. And I also did want to just give a quick shout out to the most recently accredited school, San Diego State University. We're so happy that they made it. It took many years, actually. It's quite a arduous process, and they were successful. And I heard that UCSD's program is hopefully next, and that they're in the process. Also wanted to mention that, and again, you can take a look at all of the schools that are PAB accredited through the link, but I also wanted to mention that some other California schools are Cal Poly, San Jose State, UC Berkeley, UC Irvine, UCLA, and USC. So I'll get to the next slide here. Okay, and then as Francisco mentioned, there are sort of kind of the two pathways. There's the traditional path, and then this is the eligibility requirements for the candidate program path. So you can see that if you graduate in December, the first exam that you can take is May the following year. If you graduate by May, the first exam you can take is November. The exam is only offered twice a year. So again, relative to the application, here are some important dates to be aware of. You'll see that the application window opened just earlier this month on the 5th. The deadline for those intending to submit essays for review has passed. You'll see that that has passed. But you'll see kind of the note below there. You can still submit your application and be considered for the July essay submission window. So as Francisco mentioned, you could do the essays after the exam if you want to go that route. And then finally, the application deadline is April 2nd. So here's a fee breakdown. Kind of along the same lines of what Francisco was saying about how, APA National is really trying to make the process a little bit more easy and also accessible to folks. In the past, it's really been just kind of one collective fee, but National has broken it down as of more recently to make it more manageable. I also know that there are some scholarships that are offered on a national and state level, and maybe even locally as well. So definitely get in touch with, Stephanie or I, or your local section professional development officers if you want to hear more about those scholarship opportunities. They are based on a financial need. But I did want to mention there's also been a recent shift in focus to make AICP more accessible to members from diverse backgrounds as well, which is really great. Additionally, I wouldn't hesitate to talk to your employer. A lot of times it's a policy, but sometimes it's not always known whether your employer might reimburse the fees. So it's always good to just have that conversation. You can use it as an opportunity to explain, your professional goals and also the benefits of AICP. And for step 2, I'm going to hand it back over to Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you, Asha. Now, the biggest piece of advice that I give members as they go through their certification journey is not to underestimate the importance of the essays. So we do advise that you read the guidance and the resources available to you on the APA website. So the AICP Commission has established 3 criteria to distinguish, the experience of professional planners from just, your layperson planner, maybe some allied professionals, community stakeholders, and the like. So as professional planners, we need to demonstrate a professional level of responsibility and resourcefulness while applying a planning process appropriate to a particular project or situation. Professional planners also have to evaluate multiple impacts and how those impacts a community when you're actually implementing a planning task. And also professional planners influence public decision-making in the public interest. So to earn your AICP credential, you really have to kind of demonstrate that to the review committee as part of your essays. So I wanted to provide you with just some general guidance and sort of like some pro tips for successful essay submission, because as part of the National Standards Committee and as an AICP commissioner, we get to review a lot of unsuccessful attempts for some of the essays, and we wanted to provide you with just as much guidance as possible so that you successfully pass that component of the certification process. So we do advise that you please read the instructions and refer to the AICP guide that really describe the criteria in detail and basically explain how your responses must really relate to that particular question. Follow the instructions for each of the essays. A lot of the times what we get is that people copy and paste their job descriptions, and that's not enough. Sometimes we see people copy their resume into an essay, and that is really not enough. So we want to make sure that people really pay attention to the question that's being asked and that directly address that question. Make sure that your responses clearly describe your personal role in the project. So give us, what is it that you did? It might have been a team effort, but what did you do as part of that project? And clearly identify what your position was. So were you an assistant planner? Were you an associate planner? And what part of the process were you responsible for? And what was it that you did in that planning process or planning activity? So always write your responses in the first person. So I did this, I did that. And I was responsible for this as part of my team, for example. Always use one specific project example for each essay. It's better for you to be very particular about one example and describe that thoroughly than to provide 15 examples with only a couple of sentences for each of those. So it's really better for you to go into more detail about a particular planning effort in each of the essays. And don't rely on information that you provided on, there are 3 essays. So don't tell us, oh, look at essay number 1, as I explained. That doesn't work. Actually, each of the essays stand alone as one. So make sure that you address that particular question in that particular essay. Another thing that we try and advise planners is to avoid generalities or really aspirational statements about planners. So a lot of times you read like, oh, as planners, we want to make the world a better place. And so, you go into really long drawn out explanations of how you want to make the world a better place as a planner, but you only have 250 to 500 words in an essay. And some of that information is really not telling us about the work that you were doing and how you contributed, to making your community a better place through some of your planning efforts. Another tip, please proofread your responses. I still find it really surprising at the amount of spelling and grammar errors that we review. So it's really difficult for reviewers to really evaluate the content of your responses if there's a lot of spelling mistakes and a lot of grammar mistakes. So it is really helpful for you to review your material with your coworkers or just a second set of eyes for some of these really minor mistakes. And you can also use sort of someone's help just to ensure that you have provided really clear and complete responses to the criteria. For some of them are more seasoned planners, maybe folks who are project managers or people with substantial planning experience. We sometimes see that these people actually take the essays for granted. So not only are we trying to verify the number of years of planning experience, but how your experience actually meets AICP's established criteria. So managers and directors should use examples that demonstrate their planning experience, not just their administrative or managerial responsibilities when responding to the essays. And then when finalizing your essay responses, just review them to ensure that a person who has not done the exact same type of planning as you can understand the project examples and duties that you discuss. So sort of avoid a lot of jargon, avoid a lot of acronyms that somebody at the national office may not know that is very unique to your particular community or to your particular planning profession. So just try and be as sort of inclusive with the language that you use. And as I mentioned before, just pay special attention to addressing each of the individual essays in your responses. Tell us about the work that you did. Proofread as much as possible, and don't copy and paste your resume and or job description into the essays. That will not work. Next slide. And so, these are sort of some important dates for the essay submission deadlines. We do want to recommend that you take advantage of the expedited essay review. That's what we formerly called early bird review. You're going to put some effort into your essays. If by any chance your essays are denied, if you submit for early bird, you can actually resubmit in the same certification window. So you don't have to wait for those 6 months to resubmit. So we highly encourage that. I believe it's about $70 more to do the early bird. But for me, just having that sort of reassurance that my essays were reviewed and approved a little bit earlier than waiting to the last minute would actually give me a lot of peace of mind, and I think it's worth spending that additional fee. So here are the dates for the expedited essay review. Starting February 9th, you can submit your early bird essays, your expedited review. That early window closes February 16th. If you don't submit for the expedited review, you can just submit during the regular essay window, which opens on the 16th of February and then closes on the 23rd. Also, please have your chapter professional development officer, potentially review your essays, help you along the path. Their role is really here to help you with your AICP journey, and particularly with the essays, they can be a wonderful resource.
Great, thank you, Francisco. Okay, so that concludes step 2. So now we're on to step 3, the exam. So the exam is computer-based. I wanted to point out something here. So there is a 4-hour exam, but it starts with a 15-minute tutorial, which is in addition to the 4 hours. And the 15-minute tutorial is available online anytime. It's that we put the link actually below there, that Prometric website. So I highly, highly recommend that you use that link and go through the tutorial before you sit for the exam. Because, on exam day, you've got the stresses of trying to remember everything. And, it's such a comprehensive exam that the last thing that you want is to, be kind of tripped up on this 15-minute tutorial about, how to mark your questions or review your questions later, or, just on the Prometric testing itself. So, again, I highly recommend that you, just do that 15-minute tutorial sometime, even if it's just the week or 2 weeks before, just to familiarize yourself I did that, and I was able to, click through the tutorial in just a couple of minutes. Again, it doesn't count towards your exam time, but it just was kind of nice to just click through it, already know what it says, and get right to that exam. There are 170 questions total, but only 150 questions actually count towards your score. Why is that? Because there are 20 pre-test questions. Those are not scored. And I did want to point out that sometimes those questions can come at you in the beginning of your exam. I'm fairly certain that happened to me, and you'll never know for sure. But I felt like I really had studied, and I felt like I really knew everything. And then, the first even 2 or 3 questions, I'm going, oh my gosh, this is not even what I studied, and started getting the jitters. And then I remembered, you know what, those could be pre-test questions. I mean, they could be questions that they're just kind of testing and gauging how people respond, and seeing if when they do the next exam update or refresh, if those are questions that they might use in the future. So, try not to worry too much about that. Make sure you're answering every question. You don't get docked for the wrong answer. You don't get the point, obviously, but you don't get negative. The scaled score is 55 or greater for passing. And again, that's scaled. So you can imagine, I mean, some questions are a little bit more straightforward, and some are kind of longer scenario-based questions, and you don't know how the questions are scored. But you can imagine that probably those more in-depth questions might be scored a little higher. So here's a breakdown of the subject matter, the topics that are covered on the exam. And I always like to advise that you really start with a study plan to begin the studying process and really kick it off right. Because again, it's a lot of information, and can be a little bit daunting at first, just trying to even assemble all the tools and resources and information. And so preparing a study plan can help you sort of organize, your outline, when you plan to tackle, these topics. I would even, maybe pick kind of roughly when you're going to take the exam, if it's like a certain date in May, and then just kind of work backwards and make sure that you're giving yourself the time that you need. I know that in all of our San Diego section AICP preps, we would always say, recommend at least like 100 hours of studying. So just kind of like creating a plan to really make sure to build your time accordingly. I also highly recommend that when you're thinking about your study plan or how you want to approach it, that you kind of start with the memorization pieces first, kind of those easier concepts and facts that you just need to know. The code of ethics is a great example. I mean, that's something that you're going to have to abide by, if when you reach your certification. So you need to really memorize the code, really know it. Memorize important dates, people, case law. I, for example, color coordinated my flashcards. So, one day I would focus on the people, and then maybe one day I would focus on case law, or, you could do it a number of ways. But I think that really getting a handle on memorizing all of the information is so important to then get to that next step of like pulling the pieces together, and how to apply the planning knowledge and all of that. You really have to know it first before you can think about how you're going to apply it. For those of you that have graduated more recently, or maybe on the candidate path versus traditional, that part will probably be easier for you because you'll have just learned a lot of that stuff in school. I wanted to also just mention that the Pennsylvania State chapter did a free study notes outline, and that really helped me a lot. I actually put the link down at the bottom of the slide here. It does such a great job at, I mean, first of all, the beginning of the study guide has this whole timeline that walks you through a lot of the fundamental planning knowledge. So you can kind of knock that out. It helps you focus on, what are the key important people? What is the key case law? What should I really be studying here? So that helped me a lot. I kind of use it like an outline, if you will. And it also walks through a lot of good planning theory in addition to the history, understanding the nuances between concepts like cost benefit analysis versus cost effectiveness versus fiscal impact, and, just some of that planning theory. Please do note, however, that it was prepared in 2007. So some things like, census data or current trends, I mean, you'll still need to kind of look for those, that those might be outdated. But I just wanted to mention that because it's a really kind of nice resource. Okay, so some tips for taking the exam. A lot of these I already mentioned, but a study plan is really kind of a wise first step. Flashcards, 100%. I think that's really important, and you should do that early on. Study groups or study buddies. So, in our kind of more virtual world right now, that might even be a little bit easier. Now you can find a study group or study buddy that doesn't have to be somebody, located geographically close to you. But I recommend, if you're going to form a study group, just some things that I've heard is that if your group becomes too large, then it sort of becomes a little bit more challenging, trying to schedule check-ins and work with each other on things. I ended up having just one partner, one study buddy myself, but I've heard that, groups can also be really effective. But what I would recommend is if you are going to have a study partner or group, try to think about diversifying. So for example, if you're a planner who does a lot of CEQA practice and environmentally focused, try to team with somebody who maybe is a transportation planner or, resilience work or something that maybe brings a little something different to the table and kind of maybe will understand concepts a little differently and have good, knowledge and expertise to share with you. Read up on current trends in planning. So, APA often recommends the past, I think, 3 or so years of Planning Magazine, or maybe they say 5 years. What I've found is that when we're talking about reading up on current trends, I mean, you should be doing that anyway, right? But I think what can kind of help narrow your focus a little bit is, looking at APA Nationals conferences, and maybe like what was their focus? And again, remember the exam isn't updated every year. So look back to, the past 2, 3, 4 years and kind of see what they felt were the most important, trends in planning and things like that. The APA policy guides are always really great to look at. Those are available online on APA National website. And that also gives a good indication about what, APA National feels is important at this moment in time and what you should be studying. Especially in California, we sort of get in this, our state bubble. We have a lot of, really kind of state-specific regulations and practices that we do, but this is a national exam, and you have to remember that. I mean, you really have to take your California planner hat off and think like more on a national, higher level scale, and really read up on those trends that happen, outside of your local geography or state. Practice often and with sample tests. So I really recommend doing a practice exam right away if you can get your hands on one. I know, for example, Penedison course has some, and I know there are other sources we'll talk about later. But it's really helpful to do a practice exam at the very early onset so that you can understand where your strengths are and where, you might need to focus more time. And I just say early and often. So, as part of my study plan, I kind of laid out when I was going to be taking practice exams. I mean, these exams take time, so you can't do them, all the time, but at least try to find some times where you can kind of continue to do those. Use available resources. We'll talk about resources later in the presentation. Learning the code of ethics, I can't stress that enough. Know the specifics, but be prepared to answer broader questions. So that's kind of what I was referring to when I said, do your memorization, learn the specific facts. That's only going to get you so far. The questions are a lot more nuanced and broad and scenario based than that for the most part. So you're going to need to take it to that next level and really understand how to answer those broader questions and theory-based and scenario-based. Think academic, not practical. So you really have to read the material and understand it from an APA national lens, and not think about what would you do in your job as, you know, a California planner sitting at your desk. That's not always going to be the right answer, right? So really make sure that you're thinking about it from this academic perspective, and hopefully that will also kind of help you in your practice to kind of learn different tools and methodologies. And then of course, know your test location and rules. I always say if you are going to take the exam in person, you know, drive to that location in advance. Make sure that you're really comfortable with the drive, where it's located, how to get there, what route are you going to take, and all that. So how does COVID-19 pandemic affect the exam? Well, you do get a longer testing window. As we mentioned before, the testing window is from May 1st to the 25th. Please note that AP National will contact applicants if any, you know, changes happen with the testing dates, but I think, you know, we don't foresee that happening, but they will contact you. The ability to test in person does vary based on your state and local health and safety guidelines. So, you know, please do check on that. You can check Prometric, the website right here, to see if in-person testing is allowed in your area, and just keep in mind that that could change. So just kind of be prepared. The remote testing option is available. It's through Prometric. And we just kind of wanted to note to everyone that it is possible that the exam may take you longer than 4 hours. You only get 4 hours for the exam, just like you would if you're in person. But what we're hearing is that because the remote testing is a little bit different, and you know, they have to basically do this like camera recognition that you're there for kind of security reasons and all that. That, you know, if you, for example, might lose your internet connection, or if you kind of pop off the screen and the camera is not recognizing that you were there and taking the exam, it could actually kick you off, and then you'll have to kind of log back in. And that time is not counted against your 4 hours, but it could just end up taking, we've heard from some people that it can end up taking a little bit longer because it got kicked off and they had to kind of get back in. So that's something that's really out of our control. It's a Prometric thing. But just kind of do keep that in mind. And if you have any questions about that, we can try to connect you with some folks that have opted for the remote testing. And, you know, they might be able to tell you about their experience.
Asha, if I could just jump in and add a couple of things regarding remote testing. We do provide a link to the Prometric website, and we would definitely, if remote testing is something that you're interested in looking into, we definitely recommend going to that link and taking a look at the information on the Prometric website, because APA really doesn't have any control over the testing centers. So remote testing, it's very different, I will say that. So it's good to watch the video to see clearly what security steps they take that you have to take before actually sitting for the test. So it's good just to be aware of that. And last, I do want to share a tip that was shared in the Q&A box from somebody that did sit for remote testing last year. And this person is highly recommending confirming, that the software is actually downloaded on your computer if you're taking it remotely. This person made the error of assuming that they successfully did that step, only to create unnecessary anxiety on exam day.
Thank you, Stephanie. Great comments there. All right, so important dates relative to the exam. Exam registration opened on January 19th. Exam registration and transfer deadline is April 30th. And the testing window is May 1st through to May 25th. And I am going to hand it over to Francisco now to talk a little bit about step 4, your maintenance.
Yes, so once you have passed the exams, the essays, you've received your certification, congratulations. now it's all about professional development and maintaining your certification. So as we've mentioned just a little bit earlier, certified planners are required to uphold the highest standards of ethics and behavior among our profession. So being familiar with the AICP Code of Ethics helps to prepare you for the exam, but even more importantly, it can really sort of help you negotiate through some of the tough ethical and moral dilemmas that we all experience on the job. There is a really great resource on the APA website, which is the Ethics Case of the Year archive. So those are annual presentations, and they actually include real life scenarios that have been reviewed by our ethics committee. So it's really a good resource just to see maybe what kind of questions might appear on the exam, for example. So I'd say take a look at that. That's another hot tip for folks who are interested in taking the exam. Do take a look at that. There's also certification maintenance. So to keep your knowledge and skills fresh and up to date, AICP members must earn a total of 32 certification credits. One CM credit, certification maintenance credit, is an hour's worth of active training or participation, you have to complete those 32 credits within a 2-year reporting period. So as soon as you are certified and you pay your dues, you then start earning. You can start earning your CM credits, certification maintenance. There's some minimum requirements. You have to have a minimum of 1.5 credits towards ethics training, and 1.5 credits towards current planning law. So those are two very particular components that the AICP Commission believes that every planner should regularly be maintaining and keeping abreast of. So you can earn a lot more credits than 32 in a 2-year reporting period if you happen to go to maybe a couple of national planning conferences, back to back, and then some of your local conferences and chapter conferences. So you can actually carry over any excess credits to the next reporting period. So keep that in mind if you do attend a lot of conferences or webinars as part of your professional development. You can actually carry over some of those credits to the next reporting period. The only credits that you can't carry over are those in ethics and those in law, because as I mentioned, the commission really wants you to kind of keep up to date with sort of the new trends and new training in those particular areas. So those will not transfer over. And then, once you become a certified professional planner, you are leaders in your profession, and you really want to take the opportunity to, perhaps mentor some of our aspiring planners. There's a great program for our AICP candidates to mentor with more professional, seasoned planners. So there's a great opportunity for you to help out someone who's going through their certification journey as well. There is also a mentor match program that is designed. It's really more of an online network and career development tool that allows folks to connect directly with potential mentors and mentees for them just to, share some of their successes, collaborate, and really just share information and just help each other become better planners. So that's available on the APA website as well. And more importantly, get involved, become active. So, volunteer in leadership with APA, at the national level, at the state level, at the local level. There are opportunities to, help with, running conferences of all sorts. There's also an APA ambassador program where you can volunteer to help sort of like, communities in need and communities that actually need, professional planning experience, but that they may not have that professional experience, within their local communities. So you can actually earn some pro bono certification maintenance credits for that as well. So after certification, we say you're a professional planner, you are a leader in the planning profession. And as leaders, we should try and volunteer and help other communities as much as possible. So we do advise and encourage you to do that as well. Thanks, Asha.
Okay, so I'm actually going to go over these two slides very quickly because it's 12:52. We are expecting that this will go over 1 p.m. because we do still have a lot of questions and we want to get through as many of those questions as possible. But a couple of things that I do want to highlight is that the cost of the entire certification application process, including submitting your application, the exam, and the test, is roughly about $500. APA California does offer scholarships to reduce that cost to about $200. And currently, we are focusing on making AICP more accessible to planners from diverse backgrounds. So with any information or with any scholarship opportunities, that is something that we'll be sharing with our members through the chapter email. So make sure that you subscribe to APA California to receive updates in that regard. Second, APA California does offer an online prep course for only $75. It's actually like literally the cheapest online course that I've seen. So for more information on that, check out the APA California website and you can register online there. And second, a lot of people have been asking about who do I contact to find study groups, or who do I ask if I have specific questions about the application. I highly recommend contacting your local section PDO because all of the APA sections throughout California does have local boards with a member that's designated for that specific purpose. So they're an incredible resource. Many times they're willing to review your application and your essays and provide you some feedback. A lot of times they're organizing local sessions, and they can help you find others that are looking to form a study group. Next slide, please. And this is a long list of resources offered by APA California. I'm not going to go over any of these since we will be sharing a link to the slides. But one thing I do want to emphasize is that everybody's studying process is very unique. So, what works for one person may not work for another person. So it's really about finding your own rhythm and figuring out a study plan that works best for you. Next slide, please. Okay, so with that, we are going to jump into the Q&A. Again, we're going to try to go through as many of these as possible. Okay, so the first question is, if I'm interested in taking the exam in May and expect to meet the planning experience requirement in June, should I apply under the traditional or candidate pilot track?
I guess it depends on whether you are a recent student or are a student, because the AICP candidate program is only eligible for students and recent grads. So if you are a recent grad, that is maybe an easier sort of avenue. But it seems like if you have the option, I'd say, do whatever is best for you in your situation. But if you're not AICP, a recent grad or a student, then you actually don't have an option. You have to do the traditional route.
Okay. So next question, I have requested my diploma to be mailed to me. However, there's some delay. Is it possible to proceed with the registration without providing diploma? I can go ahead and answer that. So as part of the online application, you do need to verify your education history. So unfortunately, that is something that you need to provide. However, APA National is making it more flexible and giving more options to verify your education. So if you aren't able to get your diploma, you could also provide a copy of a letter on your university's letterhead. So that might be another option, and you can reach out to your school for that. Okay, next question. Who reviews the essays? Are they academics or people that have worked in the real world?
Yeah, so APA has staff dedicated to the review of the planning essays. So they are, planners in a prior life that are now working for APA to review the essay. So it is folks with planning experience.
Okay. Okay, next question. Are planning internships counted towards total years of professional planning experience?
The answer is no. The internships don't count. It has to actually be, well, I'll take this back. Internships can count, but not if the internship was taken as part of a course or if it was a requirement of educational credit. So if you were doing an internship and it wasn't part of your schoolwork and it wasn't counting towards any of your coursework, then it may be eligible. So we just have to make certain that that's specifically specified in the application.
Is there anything you wanted to add, Asha?
No, that covers it.
Okay. So please explain why one might want to use the expedited essay review option.
I think Francisco covered that one pretty well, but I think it's largely because of just the timing factor. It's nice to know that you're, approved, that your essays are approved, and kind of gives you that confidence and assurance.
Yeah, otherwise you're going to be waiting another 6 months to apply if you don't do the early bird because you won't know that you were denied and you won't be able to resubmit within this window anymore. So you'll have to wait those additional 6 months till the next window is available.
Okay, great. Next question, can you briefly go over the scoring system for the exam portion? What is the minimum points and maximum points for a given question?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if that's that information is available. I don't know, Francisco, do you know?
I would say that that's one of the great mysteries of the AICP exam. And it's kind of funny because it tops out at 75. So I think it's just like an extra layer that complicates things. So my understanding is that some questions can be weighted to, to be worth more than other questions. But unfortunately, it's one of those things where, it's just a big mystery.
It's a mystery. And then I think, like I mentioned before too, I mean, I think you kind of know because some questions are just a little bit more straightforward and a lot of them are a little more in depth, maybe 2 paragraphs long. And, so you can probably gauge which ones are maybe weighted more than others, but.
Okay, so next question. To reduce computer eye strains, are there any hard copies of study guides or textbooks available for purchase?
The Pennsylvania guide that I provided a link to in the slide is a PDF that you can print. There's resources like they call it the Green Book. I actually don't remember even the formal title, but that's a great resource. There are actually a lot of resources online that you can print if you prefer hard copy.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question, can we take the pilot path to take the exam first before filling in the experience documentation, which we may already earned? I'm sorry, I'm just having trouble reading this question. Wondering if the experience has to be earned after the exam.
So the experience can be earned whenever, either before the exam or after the exam. So that's not a sort of a limit. As long as it's professional planning experience that you did not as part of a coursework requirement, it should count. You should be eligible to submit that.
Okay, thank you. Next question. So although your school is accredited for its master program, if the bachelor's program is not accredited, do we need to supplement that by levels of experience?
No, it's just you either go off of your bachelor's or if you have a master's, then you go off of that one. So if your master's is PAB accredited, then you go off of that eligibility criteria box.
Okay, next question relates to experience if you work in academia. This person asks, how does our experience break down? Do research projects count? Does teaching count? Does time as a graduate student, TA, or instructor count?
Experience as an educator does count. I think you just have to be very specific to how it actually meets the criteria. So I would advise, if you are an educator, contact the AICP office, AICP@apa.org, just to sort of review your particulars, and they can provide you a little bit more info. I think it just depends on the, what type of work that you're doing. Was it for credit? Was it not for credit as part of a PhD program, for example? So it's kind of really depends on the situation. So I'd say contact APA for more information.
Okay, great. Next question. It says, my application was denied last year to response to one of the essay criteria. Can I carry over my essay forward to a future application, or do I need to rewrite all essays? So the short answer to that is yes. If you already applied and only some of the essays were rejected, you would only be expected to revise that specific essay portion. That goes along the lines of APA National wishing to provide greater flexibility to make the certification process smoother. Let's see. There's a lot of questions, so I'm trying to go through them. Okay, this person asks, can I submit the essays by the February timeline, but plan to take the test in November?
Sorry, can you repeat it?
If this person applies to take the exam now, can they still take the exam in November instead?
Yeah, so that would be the slide where we discussed the important dates. There is a you can use the transfer option. So you can transfer if you feel you're not ready after all to sit for the May exam. You can transfer your testing window to November.
Okay, great. Next question. If I decide to take the test first and then complete the essays, how long is my test score valid for? So they want to proceed with the exam and then complete the essays later on.
I'm trying to see if I can find the information. I'm not quite certain how long. It's not indefinite for sure. And if I can find the information online, I will put it in the chat, but it's not for more than a couple of years for sure, if maybe even a year. So you do have to sort of get to it at some point. Let me see if I can find that info for you.
Okay, great. And I believe that goes along the lines of transferring. If you don't expect to take the essays and exam during the same certification cycle, then you would have to request that it be transferred to the next cycle. Okay, next question. I'll receive just enough experience to qualify in March. Will I have to wait until next year to submit my essay?
So then probably not next year, but just the next testing period. So July is when the next window will open for the November exam. So if you're hitting all of your eligibility requirements by March, then look out for the next testing window to open in July, and that would be the appropriate time for you.
And Francisco and Asha, if you see any specific questions that we should cover, since some of them are very specific, I would actually recommend following up via email to the email address that I showed earlier in the presentation, or just simply responding to the email that we'll be sending out to everybody after the presentation. Some of them are very specific.
Yeah, so I see one that says, I submitted the application and received a notification that review can take up to 4 weeks. Should I begin studying and preparing for the May, assuming it'll be approved? I'm going to answer this because I hear this a lot from people. And then it says, is the application judged just based on meeting the criteria? So yeah, it takes a while to get your notification, and honestly, even in previous testing periods, a lot of folks wouldn't even know if they were eligible to test until just like the month or so before. So what I always say is, I mean, I think it's pretty clear, the eligibility criteria and so forth. So I mean, if you're confident that you're kind of checking those boxes, I would go ahead and study. I would not wait. And you can always, if something happens, you can always take it up with National or contact your PDO if you need help. But you could always end up taking the exam just in November, and that studying doesn't, is still valuable time. So I would say I wouldn't wait. And then another one says, I didn't pass the first time in November 2020 exam cycle. I plan to take the exam again this May. Do I have to resubmit essays? I don't think so, but Francisco, maybe you can, because your essays are probably valid, I would assume, for at least like a year duration.
Right. I believe so. So you basically, because we've broken it down into this component, you've now completed that one particular component. As long as you're within, I think it's 1 or 2 testing windows, you're eligible to get credit for that. So, just take your exam as soon as possible.
Okay, I have one question where this person was previously a certified planner, but they were not able to earn enough CM credits to maintain their certification. So they are asking, do they have to start all over again, despite the many years of experience as a professional planner?
So there is an opportunity for you to appeal to the AICP Commission to reinstate your AICP if you're not AICP. And there are a couple, I think it's either for extreme financial hardship or maybe a medical hardship. So there are opportunities to do that. I'd say contact the AICP and they can, contact APA and they can help you guide you through that process. So that is possible. And I have seen some of those appeals go through due to, recent financial hardship that you can get reinstated. You will have to make up those lost CM credits for however many years you were not certified.
Great, thank you. So let's see, should we take just a couple more questions or go ahead and wrap it up?
I have time for a couple more questions. That's fine.
Okay.
We still have a little over 100 people with us, so yeah, we can. I have time to take a couple more.
Okay.
What's the average pass-fail rate for the exam? So I remember tracking our local rate, but I'm not sure. Do either of you have the latest? I thought it was like 55% or 60%, like around 60% for a while.
Yeah,
so
it's generally, sorry, go on, Francisco. I'm sure you have the numbers.
No, there you go. Yeah, I was going to say, I think the same thing. It's around 55 to about 60%. And I wanted to sort of just highlight that it's not a really easy exam. So don't feel bad if you don't pass the first time. A lot of people don't pass the first time. And it doesn't mean you're a bad planner. It just means that particular, this particular test is hard. It's difficult. So that's why we advise you to prep for it and study because it's not easy. So with a 55% pass rate, 60% pass rate, that should show you that you maybe have to pay particular attention to studying a little bit harder maybe than not.
Right. And that relates to this next question where this person took the exam in November and several questions were out of the blue. They only have 4 years of experience, not mainly involved with project processing. Do you have any study tips or suggestions?
I think we mentioned some of this. I think Asha mentioned, look at some of the trends more globally. Look at the APA website. Look at their news section in the APA website. What have been, the recent articles that they've published? What have been recent articles in the Journal of American Planning Association? So then you'll kind of get a little sense for what APA thinks are really important subjects to be studying. And some of those questions may come up. So refer to the news section of the APA website, as well as to some of the journals and the blog posts and the like, because that might give you a better understanding of some of the more recent contemporary items that they're looking for. Yeah,
and I remember getting questions about conferences. So that's why I had mentioned the conferences, because seeing kind of what are the overarching topics, what is the what's the theme of the conference, what are kind of the main topics covered and sessions geared towards. I felt like that was really important. And then also those, the APA policy guides that I mentioned, they're available on the APA national website. Again, if you have like a study buddy or a study group, it's great to divvy those up. And what we did, for example, was, you know, I took a few and then my study partner took a few and we read them and then we, you know, highlighted them and then summarized for the other person kind of the most important points. So that helps kind of like reaffirm your learning of the material. So not just reading it, but then like kind of digesting it and then summarizing it back to somebody else. Because I noticed that some of the kind of more obscure questions or, you know, ones that I was sort of like, that wasn't on a practice exam or in a course. I came to find a lot of those came from those APA policy guides because those are kind of like things that APA National feels are really important. And there are a lot of policy guides, but you can kind of weed out, you know, the ones that I guess highlight and focus on the ones that seem most relevant, you know, today. Again, based on, as Francisco said, looking at the website, what's the news that they're covering, what are the conferences, what are they talking about, and things like that.
Okay, one question is, do you recommend taking the exam at a center or online at home?
So my personal preference would be in an exam center, but I know that maybe it's not available to everyone, and then there's obviously the health concerns and all that. So, but I don't know that I would necessarily recommend one or another. I think it's just a personal choice. If you go to a center, you know, they have kind of the process pretty well. I mean, you can't go in with any materials. And even if you want to, you know, remove your jacket or your sweater, you actually have to leave and do that and put it in your locker and then come back. So I always recommend, you know, wearing layers in case, you know, you get hot or cold, but just know that. But I think being in a center, you're really focused. And I know that the remote testing has some challenges, but I'm happy that that's available to folks, and I can't really speak to that because I didn't use that option myself. But I know that that might be the only option for some people. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there's a question on how to find a study buddy. We highly recommend contacting your local section PDO because they typically compile a list of interested individuals and then connect them with each other.
It looks like somebody has a question. If somebody submitted the application last year and the ACEs were denied, would that person have to pay the fee again to apply this year? And so the answer is yes. So basically the fees pay for, you know, the staff that's reviewing and staff time to review those essays. So if you were denied, you basically have to submit de novo, new, and pay the fee. Pay the fee, either the expedited review fee or just the regular review fee for the essays.
Okay. Next question is, can I take continuing education courses now prior to AICP and use those credits to apply for future AICP continued credit? So they're asking about taking CM eligible session or earning CM now before earning certification.
And the answer is no. You have to be certified, pay your dues, your AICP dues, and then once that happens, then you are eligible to earn CM credits. You can't earn CM credits before you're certified or pay your dues.
Okay. And then just two more questions, so I think we can get through this. If you take the exam and pass it, how long are the results valid? Do they expire at some point?
So I think Francisco mentioned he was trying to look that up. I mean, that's a new option, you know, so I think we're still figuring out all the details, but I would say your safest bet would be to go ahead and submit your essays in July. When the next testing window opens, it'll open in July for November, and I would highly recommend to go ahead and do that because we know that they will still be valid at that point for sure. Beyond that, we don't know.
Okay. And then last question is regarding the AICP candidate program. What is considered a recent graduate?
I think a recent graduate is, I believe it's 2 years. So if you've graduated within the last 2 years, and I'm looking furiously to see if I can find that on the website, and I don't, but I think if, you know, that's pretty reasonable for me. Yeah, unfortunately, the website I'm on doesn't give you the exact timeline, but I think if if you've graduated and it's been more than a couple of years, you probably would not qualify.
Mm-hmm. Okay, wonderful. So that concludes the Q&A. We somehow were able to get through all the questions, and it's great that everybody had questions and was really engaged. And thank you for everybody that stuck with us to the very end. It's really exciting to see and know that there are so many planners out there that are interested in pursuing certification. So as I mentioned earlier, we will be emailing everybody that registered with a link to this recording, as well as a link to the PowerPoint slide, as well as a couple of additional really important links through the APA National website that we recommend looking over at your own leisure. We'll also have contact information there as well. So if you have any follow-up questions or just need any guidance as you continue pursuing the certification process, feel free to reach out to any of us at any time. So thank you so much to our wonderful speakers, Asha Bleier and Francisco Contreras, and thank you all for joining us and sharing your lunch hour to learn more about AICP. And have a wonderful day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.